there. Welcome to our first Alt plus Tab live stream user group podcast. My name is Dawn Harrington. This is obviously showing on my Tech Tips Girl, channel in Twitter, or my Tech Tips Girl channel in YouTube, or my LinkedIn profile. So I want to say welcome, and I'm going to turn it over to Chris. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're listening from. My name is Chris Williams. I'm the Chief Technical Officer for my own company, Precision Analytics Group. I'm based out of Irvine, California. I'm an Alteryx ace, I'm a Tableau ambassador, and I look forward to taking you on a data analytics journey during this whole podcast.
All right. Thanks, Chris. Mike, because you're underneath me in the screen, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Pleasure coming to you all from underneath on today. It's a pleasure to be here. And my name is Mike McDowell. I work in the financial services industry. And at our firm, I was an early adopter of Alteryx and Tableau. I was really excited, not being a heavy coder coming into data, learning these tools that were largely code-free and getting to take advantage of their power and learn some coding while using them, but really being able to take advantage of what they can do. And now I'm our North America training lead for Alteryx and Tableau as well, and love sharing the passion that I've developed for these tools with other people, seeing how it's transforming their careers and getting them ready for the jobs of today and the jobs of tomorrow. So really excited to be with y'all.
So Mike has given more. Now I feel like that I didn't put enough about what I do, but that's okay. I'm going to turn it over to Bill. You can go ahead and introduce yourself now, but just don't be as long as Mike, just.
All right, Bill, nice to meet you. All right, you take it off now. Bill Martina, great to meet you. Started off as a game designer, got into data, met Dawn and McDowell within our career, learned these tools, Alteryx and Tableau, to kind of get myself into the data world. And I now train on Alteryx and Tableau within the company I'm at to kind of help upskill everybody globally within our firm as well. And I work with McDowell and previously worked with Dawn and McDowell as well on other teams. So glad for their years of support and to be on this podcast with them today to teach everybody about the tools that we use to kind of get real good data insights and bring that to our partners.
Do we want to do interesting facts? Bill, do you want to do an interesting fact about yourself?
About me. So I started off, actually, weird path. So I started off in acting, found out that acting did not make money. And then I stopped that and actually got a job making money. Decided after a couple years that I wanted to make games. So I was working in credit at one of the major banks, and then started making games with no coding experience on no code tools. So that's kind of a fun fact. I have 2 commercial games that are flops. Didn't make any money, but I still learned the process of learning logic through those, and then didn't get my degree until years later. After getting into data and learning a little bit of SAS and SQL as well.
Cool. Mike, do you want to say a fun fact about yourself?
Sure. So I actually have no computing or data background as far as education goes. I was a political science major, so it makes total sense I do what I do now. But kind of like Bill, I kind of stumbled into it. I found jobs in financial services that I ended up liking. And when I found data, that's where I really kind of found my passion. I absolutely loved it, seeing what you could do with it, using it to inform decisions. And started learning some of the code that Bill mentioned, really took to SQL, not so much to SAS, which was always a conversation for Bill and I, but really enjoying this career in data. And then just on the personal side, big Star Wars nerd, talk about that with Dawn a lot, as well as Star Trek. I do not believe it has to be one or the other. So another fun fact about me, I will enjoy both of them equally. So,
Chris, what about yourself?
So fun fact, I was a classic rock DJ in college, in the basement of a freshman dorm at the University of Virginia where I went. And I also have done voiceovers for documentaries when I was younger. So I too am don't have a computer background as far as schooling. I was a Russian major and a psychology minor. So all the more reason why anybody can get into analytics at any time if you have the mind for it. So it's great to be here. This is going to be a fun journey.
I learned Tableau. Well, I would say Mike, when I was back on the same team as Mike and Bill, I saw Mike using the Tableau software, and I was like, wow, I really want a license. I want to play around. I want to start doing, visualizations with that tool. I, like Bill and Mike, SAS programmer, had some SQL, teach classes, so like Bill also teaches classes, and so does Mike. But just super excited about the tool. And I love Alteryx as well. Like, I'm an Alteryx innovator and a Tableau social ambassador. And I never, ever want to stop using Alteryx. Love the tool so much. I've even created a wedding bingo card through the Alteryx tool itself. I did a randomization, 32 different bingo cards. And wedding bingo is like, you see the bride hug somebody, mark it as complete, just a little bit fact. But let's start talking about what is Alteryx and like maybe some use cases about how we use it. I'm going to turn it over to Chris for that.
Well, thank you so much. And yes, you can see I've got the gear today representing the Mavericks, which is the community for Alteryx. And for some of you who don't know what Alteryx is, let me go ahead and break that all down for you. Alteryx is a data analytics platform designed to enable users to blend, prepare, and analyze data from a multitude of or litany of data sources. Could be flat files, could be databases, could be Excel held spreadsheets, however you want. We want to try to get you out of Excel held. So it also provides tool for data integration, data cleansing, and advanced analytics, including two of my favorites, predictive and spatial analytics. So, when I look at, when I've been doing Alteryx for about 8.5 years now, one of the reasons why I got into using Alteryx is because it literally saves time in my day. I can automate all of these processes that are so mired in tedium. It makes you want to pull your eyelashes out. So what I encourage you, what happens when you open the Alteryx interface is you develop something from opening a file or opening your data source to a conclusion. Left to right, top to bottom, depending on what team you're on, as far as team horizontal or team vertical, you create something called a workflow. That workflow, once you build it once, all you have to go ahead and do is hit Control R or hit the press play to execute that workflow whenever you please. So if you have a tedious process, or maybe you have something that you do a lot, you might want to think about putting it into Alteryx. So what I want to try and do is show you a little bit about some of the cool things that you can do and some of the cool tips that you can do within Alteryx. So before I get into that, what do I use Alteryx for? I have a variety of clients, ranging from manufacturing clients to government clients to all school, education, gaming. So one of the things I find myself using I have a winery client. I use Alteryx to basically balance their wineries, individual wineries within an organization. I created a bunch of Alteryx workflows to automate that process. Before I got there, it took about 6 weeks for them to compile this ridiculously large Excel spreadsheet to do what they needed to do. I was able to take the logic from the spreadsheet and condense it to a workflow that took 7 seconds to execute. And so when I did that, their mind was blown. I was kind of mind blown too, because when I first did it, and it took me, I was working on the East Coast, flying back out west, and I was able to do that in about 5 hours, which was the entire duration of my flight. And when I displayed it to them, they're just like, wait, what? So Alteryx really does do that. But a lot of people think of Alteryx as just a prep and blend tool. It's a lot more than that. It can do prep and blend quite well, but it makes a lot of other your tools around it much better. It makes Tableau better. because it does a lot of the metadata layer, although Tableau has a metadata layer too that it can use. But the predictive, I use predictive, being able to create macros, be able to create analytic applications that other people can use. It just makes it one of a kind. So would you like me to go into some tips now, or is that what we want to do, Dawn? Okay.
Yeah, go for it.
So let me share my screen. Okay, so I'm going to put you over here. I'm going to enlarge this, and I'm going to zoom in so everybody doesn't have to get a magnifying glass in here. Okay, so this is a workflow that I've done for one of my Department of Transportation clients. Okay, so basically we have CSV data, which is in here, and we convert it to a Smartsheet format. I'm in the process of actually going to create something to actually like a connector to push it into Smartsheets. But there are a couple things that I want you to go ahead and take a look at. So this is going to get talked about a little bit later on, but one of the things whenever I use a tool, I make sure that I go ahead and tell what each of these tools are doing. And so let's go over a couple things that I like to do to make sure, some quick tips. So for example, one of the things I really like to do here is to obviously explain what's going on, but I use something called workflow variables. And as you can see here, when you go to workflow variables, you're like, well, workflow constants, what do those mean? What does that really tell us? These are things that you can use that you can put into your constants and create a formula off of it within your workflow without having to go back into changing it multiple times in a workflow. So for example, if I have a 6 or 7 tool workflow, but if you have something that's like 5 times the size and you don't want to have to go into the formula tool and change everything, I would encourage you to go ahead and go into workflow and create a constant for it. These would be called user constants. So for example, I'm going to bring up this screen here. So this is my Windows Explorer. I have demos in here. So say, for example, I have a dev, QA, and prod environment. And say you don't have server, okay? You don't have Alteryx server. But you want to separate all of these environments appropriately, right? So you create your folder structure as such. 10_dev, 20, and so forth. QA, prod. What I want to do is just say, hey, I don't want to have to go into my workflow and change all of this all the time when I move it from one to the next to the next. What I want to do is go ahead and create something called a user variable. You would go ahead and hit this plus button. And in this case, I created my base directory, which is a little bit different from the workflow directory. I created my base directory, and I created my environment, and then I created a short environment and I'll tell you why I did that in a second. So when I go in here and look at my input tool is referencing something called extract data, CSV. So what I did was I have this user %, user.base directory, %. So that makes reference to the workflow constant that I created, okay? For the environment, this is 10_dev. So I made sure that in my workflow constant, I put 10_dev, okay? For the short one, I put dev. So where does the short one come into play? So I have this output file here. So this output's to Excel. So what I want to do now is just be like, okay, I just want to make sure that I know that this output is only referencing dev data. So what do? I put everything here. You see all of this here, the user base directory, the environment, and then the Smartsheet format _ your environment that you're in. And in this case, this would be dev. Okay. So now we have this here. So I'm going to go ahead and go back into here. I'm going to close this guy down. And I'm going to go to my dev, and I'm going to be like, okay, I'm just going to copy this, and I'm going to go up and then over to QA. Actually, I'm just going to copy it and go up to prod. Let me do that. I'll just copy over it. Let me delete this, and I'll copy here. Okay, so now I'm in a totally different directory, 30 prod. So what I want to do now actually is go into this. I'll open this guy. It's hiding behind here. All right, so first thing I want to do, everything stays the same. Obviously, you want to make sure your folder structures are unique or are similar for all three environments or whatever environment you want to do. First thing I'm going to do, change this to 30 prod. That's all you have to change. Now all you have to do is just execute this guy, and then you're done. When you go into your prod, look at your output. Has everything in here for your smart route sheet, your prod. This is working off production data. Say you have data that's different in each one. You don't have to go through and change everything in your workflow. You just have to change your workflow constant. And that just makes life a lot easier. I see so many people don't use this. I think this is something that could be definitely useful. That's the first tip. Second tip, I highlight the formula tool. And this is something that kind of bothers me. Whenever I do teach Alteryx, all levels of Alteryx. And one of the things that bothers me is stuff like this. You see the VW string in this ridiculously large size for that string. Using the Princess Bride reference, when you have rodents of unusual size, RUSs, I like to deter people from making fields of unusual size. So if you know the field is supposed to be like 500 or 250, please change this to 250 or 500. And that just makes it so that you don't have memory leaks later, or you're making sizes and this may not be as bad for 11 fields that you have, but you multiply that by 11 more. Maybe you have 100 fields and you don't do this, you can notice some significant issues. So I challenge you to actually dedicate what the size of the field is actually supposed to do. And last but not least, and this is going to generate some discussion, okay? So you have these select tools, and I'm choosing a lot of fields here, and there's a field down here called star unknown. Now, usually when I teach, I say, please don't uncheck this. Please don't uncheck this. And because if for some reason you want to have, you want your workflow to continue running, because if you uncheck that and you have new fields, your workflow will die. It'll be like, hey, I don't know what to do with this field because you unchecked the unknown. However, there are some times in which you want to have that unchecked. And this is one of the things as I stop sharing for a minute and I bring everybody else up for discussion on this topic here. Please discuss some of the situations when having that field unchecked, that unknown box from your select tool, why that would be a good thing.
Yeah, I can definitely talk to that. So as I mentioned earlier, I work in the financial services industry, and a lot of our data can be very sensitive. So we have monetary non-public information, things that can't be disclosed to other users. We have information that might be LOB specific that they don't want shared across the business. A lot of sensitive data in our organization, and we connect to some really large databases. And I can tell you, we have a lot of developers in our org with, we'll say, varying degrees of technical expertise with like how they might be pulling their data in. So some of them might be doing like a select star SQL statement, meaning just bring everything in the database, bring me every column and let it come through. Or they might be connecting to random Excel files, which sadly are still very much in use across the bank. So those random Excel files, the negative part about using that as your data input means if somebody else on your team who has no idea what you're actually using that file for goes in and adds a column and then adds some data to it, and you've got that dynamic field selected in Alteryx, then all of a sudden that data field is going to get pulled into your workflow, which in some cases, maybe you want that. Maybe you want your report to be dynamic and pick up new fields as they're added and things like that. There might be other cases, though, where this report's going to a specific audience. Maybe you've got an email tool at the end of it, something like that, that's just sending out a final output. And you don't want some new sensitive field that shouldn't be going to all those users to be included in your data set. So in that case, you would definitely want to make sure that's unchecked. You know exactly what your output should look like. You know what fields you want included, and you don't want anything else included unless you go back and actually make a change to that report that you're going to document and everything like that, so that you can make sure you're going through a controls process, because a lot of what we do is very controlled. So that's a case where I would want to make sure that's unchecked. And like Chris said, when you're a trainer, a lot of times you need to kind of talk to situations where you may or may not. A lot of my fellow trainers know that one of my favorite answers when somebody asks me a question is, it depends. Like, they kind of gave me that hashtag in our training, like whenever I say it, because there's rarely a always do this, always do that kind of answer. And this is one of those instances. Like, I can tell you more often than not, despite what I train, I probably leave that checked because I usually want that data in there. But I can tell you there's some very specific cases, especially for developers that I work with, where I know they need to have that unchecked so that they're not bringing in any extra fields that may creep into their data. So that is a really good discussion to be had about when is a good time versus not a good time to utilize that dynamic thing. And also keep in mind, there's some tools, like if you're using a data cleanse tool, I hope you're not, but I hope you're using a multi-field tool instead. That'll be a topic for a future discussion, I'm sure. But the dynamic tool is not, or the data cleanse tool is not dynamic. It's not going to pick up and cleanse those dynamic fields unless you specifically check them, which you can't do if they don't exist. So there's things like that to consider as well. So just a lot of stuff.
So much.
Bill,
Go ahead, Don.
I was just going to say, Bill, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's funny because I was going to bring up that it depends. Like, no answer can ever be absolute with anything. So in most situations, I would say leave that checked. So I agree with Chris. McDowell tends to err on the side of caution and say in most cases leave that unchecked. But I say it depends on the situation. If you know that you have static data that you're never going to want anything else coming out of there, then definitely uncheck it. And that's the only instance I would uncheck it. And that's the only instance that I would recommend. If you know you're never going to need new data in there, then check that, uncheck that, and make sure that you document on there, why you're unchecking it, that you're, put a note in there, hey, left unknown unchecked because I don't want new fields. So you can do that in the workflow as well.
Yeah.
So for those of you that are listening, we're talking about, when you have a field, you're bringing in a data set, and like a select tool, that kind of thing, where you look at the bottom, it says unknown fields. Do you leave that checked? Do you leave that unchecked? So, if you're doing a union, I think it's kind of like user error, like you get the same file in the same folder every month, and you're going to do a union to automatically, well, you're going to use a couple of other tools to automatically bring them in Alteryx, but I'm thinking of Tableau here. If you're doing a union in Tableau and you're bringing them in, if someone had made a mistake or added a space or like another character in a column, suddenly that schema has changed. So a union is going to bring that in as a new column. So you're going to have to do some data cleanup in order to do that. So Mike was saying leave it unchecked, and it really depends on what you're doing. So that's what our conversation is about, just to rehash in case anybody's hopped on since the question was asked.
Yeah, and the one thing I'll leave you with when it comes to Alteryx, and this is something that I'll reiterate as we go through this whole process in this series, is I challenge you to find 3 ways to do something within Alteryx. That way you're never stuck. So we've mentioned a couple ways of doing data cleansing. We've mentioned a couple ways to resize your fields. We've mentioned a couple ways to utilize constants. As you're going through your journey and learning Alteryx, try to add tools to that toolbox, and that's why we're here.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing your tip, Chris. Did you have anything else that you wanted to add?
No, I think this is good. This is going to be the start of something awesome. So let's keep it going.
All right. So for those of you that are listening, if you are Tableau users, because this is Alteryx and Tableau, I'm going to do a Tableau tip that I did in my blog this week called the Lindsay Poulter method. So who is Lindsay Poulter? She is a famous name in the Tableau community. She is a 2019 Iron Viz finalist. And if you had no chance to see Iron Viz is that awesome, challenge where you have 3 people on stage and they're trying to build a dashboard in 20 minutes. So it's quite stressful. I don't think I could do it. But they know lots of tips and tricks for building dashboards faster. So I'm going to go ahead and present my screen and I'm going to show you that method. So let me go ahead and select the entire screen. There we go. So a quick tip that I like to do is if you know that you're going to use some of the same calculated fields over and over and over again, like date calculations. You know, you have a dashboard where you want to show maybe the difference between year over year, month over month, with some visualizations like I have in this dashboard here. You can see I've got some down arrows and the percent changed for year over year, YOY, month over month. So maybe you want to do that. Maybe you want to save those calculated fields because you're using them over and over and over again. So what I like to do is I put them in a notepad. So you can see I've got a lot of date calculations here. And can I control? Yes, I can hold my control key down and hit the plus key. Another Windows tip here. Not just Windows, Tableau, or Alteryx. I'm doing Windows tips. So you can see that I have them separated by a / with a title. So this is the Lindsay Poulter method of highlighting the calculated field and just dragging it right onto your data pane, and it's not letting me do it. Live, you see it, errors where it's not letting me do the thing that I need to do. Let's try this again. And it's not allowing me to do that. Is it because I'm sharing my screen? Is that what's going on?
The joys of live.
I swear it's worked in the past. Is it? Oh, no. I know what I did wrong. Okay, so you're supposed to copy them, Lindsay Poulter method, Dawn, Lindsay Poulter method, and put them in a calculated field first. So you go to your Tableau, create calculated field. So sorry, this is Dawn's brain is slowly working method here. So you highlight it once all of your calculated fields are in a calculated field. You take it and then drag it. So you highlight that very first one, latest date, drag it onto the data pane. And I can see just like that, it's created the calculated field. So I'm going to take latest week and drag that right onto the data pane. I'm going to take latest month and drag that right onto the data pane. And latest year, drag that right there. So you see how much time this saves you instead of having to go in and do create a calculated field, put it in here. Oh, this is my sales, calculation here, typing it out. So this will just save you time if you just save all of them ahead of time in a notepad. And don't forget that step of opening the calculated field and putting all your calculations in there and then dragging each one. So you have to have that / for the title. Another tip that I want to give you in Tableau Public is I like to organize my calculations because be nice and kind to your future self 6 months from now when maybe you haven't touched this workbook at all and you want to go in and see what were you doing. So you can organize your calculated fields with folders. So you have to go up in the data pane and select this drop down arrow and say group by folder first. Because right now they were grouped by the data source table. And then you can hold your shift key down and select multiple calculations at once and right click to create a folder and put them in that folder. So I'm right clicking, create folder here, and I'm calling these date calcs. So it's going to automatically put all those calculated fields in this folder, and then it keeps all of the original fields there. So that is one way to organize your calculated fields. Another thing you can do is you can also add comments. So if you right click on a calculated field and then go to default properties, there is this comment item here. So you can click on that comment and you can say this LOD pulls the most recent date. And now when I hover over that calculated field, my comment will pop up. So not only do I need to I can choose to put it in my calculated field with those // notes, or now I could just change the default properties, save myself some time, and put a comment in there. So not only can you do comments, you can set the default color for a calculated field, you can set a default date format, and so on with those default properties. So get into the habit of doing these the first time. It'll save you time down the road. So the other thing you can do is format your workbook all at once by going up to the format menu up here and selecting format workbook. Those are the two habits that I really want most of the people that I teach to get, and you guys out there listening, to get into the habit of doing first. So format workbook, and you can get rid of all those pesky grid lines by turning them off. You can set all of your fonts at once. You can get rid of 0 lines, because all these do is they create visual noise. So they have lines in the screen. Do you really need those lines? So you can turn those all off at once. So lots of Tableau tips here, and I am going to stop sharing my screen. I can see we have some users commenting already. Sharina is excited for this session. Thank you, Sharina, for watching. Someone had mentioned that they love this tip, Life is Easier method. Do we need to sort calculated fields or anything like that? So default properties, there is a sort function here. So go ahead and get into that habit of adjusting your default properties, and you can set sorts right from there as well. So I'm going to stop presenting somehow. Stop screen. There we go. All right. So thank you, Chris, for your tip. I'm going to thank myself for doing my tip.
Thank you too. So thank you.
Yeah. We'll all chip in on that, Don.
And now I'm going to turn it over to Bill for other documentation tips with Alteryx.
Absolutely. I'm going to throw a little bit of Tableau in there as well. So I think you did some great tips there on documentation with the comments for your formulas. I think that is extremely helpful. So let me share my screen. So I specifically made this Alteryx workflow to be very simple. This is sample store data. We can see, and what we want to talk about, what I want to talk about in this tip is actually commenting. So you're going to build a workflow, and where you're going to see is you start off small. As Chris was talking about before, getting rid of Excel and kind of going into the more advanced Excel, which is Alteryx. You want to think about how you would build it in Excel, and then you want to translate that to tools that you would use in Alteryx. So you have the input tools, you have the select tools, you have the join. You need to join the data together. How would you do that? I'd create a pivot table, kind of the same functionality. So you just go step by step on tool, but on the tools of what you're thinking through, and you actually start off with baby steps, to quote the movie, which me and McDowell talked about quite often. But anyway, the baby steps of your data journey and what you do in Excel, and then you build that out with each tool. And then eventually you'll get to this massive workflow that you have no idea how you got there. And I guarantee you, a week from now, 2 weeks from now, you're going to look back on this and you're going to be like, I have no idea what I did, how I got there. It's broken now. How do I fix it? What's going on? You can see here, this is the default that Alteryx will do. It'll say, okay, here's your input file. Here's the notes I'm going to give you about the input file. Here's the tabs that you choose for this. And this is an Excel document. It doesn't tell me about anything I'm doing with the selects. It doesn't tell me what I'm joining on. It doesn't tell me what I'm unioning on. It kind of gives me a little notes about my formula here. And it gives me some notes about my sorting as well. It doesn't tell me what it's summarizing on. This is a poor example of, it's a good example of what not to do, but it's a poor example of documentation. There are tools. You can go into each one of these tools. Let's say I go into the join tool. You can go in and you can click on annotations, and you can say, I'm joining orders to people based on, and you can go back to the tool and see what the join is that you selected here, region, because that's my join criteria in there. So now I have that note in there, so I don't need to click on that tool to figure it out. I can see what that tool is doing by just looking at it right now. The benefit of that is you're going to be able to understand what it is as at a view. I can pass it off to McDowell and I can give him this workflow and he can read that and understand as well. Plus, if you're in coding and you're in data, you're going to need to tell people that your solution is working properly. You're going to need to prove it to people that are in some kind of controls and that want to make sure that there's no error in what you're doing, because most times, these workflows have very big decisions that are being made off of them. So they want to make sure that they have the right information. So if I document this well enough, I can just hand this documentation to them and they'll say, oh, yep, that's doing that. That join is now joining based on region. That's exactly what it should be doing. And they can look through it and read it as they go along. Another thing that I recommend is you want to kind of put every step that you do in your process into containers so that we can turn them off and turn them back on if you don't need, and also document it as well. Well, how do you do that? Well, there are tool containers. Let's say I want to make sure that this input, if I don't need it for whatever reason, I can turn it off. You want to do this especially with output. You can just left click and drag all the import containers and right click on them and add to a container. Now, on this new container, you can color code this anything you want. You can give it a different border color, background color, change the font. You can rename the container. And in this instance, I'm just going to name it inputs files. And now I can turn this off for whatever reason. You could do that by clicking this little button here, and then it won't run when you hit that run button. But this is another way to kind of separate out your workflow and tell you what each one is doing along the process. My select tools I'm not too worried about. My join tools, maybe I want to put those in their own containers as well. So here I'm saying join and union data. So I accidentally put my formula in there. That's fine. I can move this around. I can take my formula, I can drag it out, and then automatically it'll adjust based on where you put that tool. So if I wanted this to go back into that container, I can just put it right at the edge of that tool and I'll go back in, but I don't want it in there. I can just move it out. And then you can, of course, readjust as need be. So these are two ways that you can comment. You can annotate each tool specifically. And I recommend it if you look through the starting documents that Alteryx has that says start here. If you go through those workflows that they have, they number each tool with each step that it goes along the process, along with the number of the tool, because each one of these tools does have a specific number as you put it in. See, this input data 1 is the first one. So it starts off with number 1. This starts off with 2, 3, and you can see where I put the tools in on the workflow. So you can actually put that in your annotations, the tool number, along with where it is in the process, and then what they do in each process as well. I can put more data in here as well. I can also go up and grab a comment box, and I can drag that in from my search at the top, and I can say, need to join and union with no returns. Because I know that this bottom set down here is the returns, and I want to just join the rest of it on the returns, and I want to take out the returns and put that in their own thing. So I can do that along each step along this process. It would be better for me to say what I'm summing on and what I'm making a group of in the summarize tool, so I can go ahead and do that as well. Another great thing is with this formula tool, if you want to add some notes, why am I making a cost formula in here? I want to see how much each product costs. So I'm using that. Go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt you, Bill, but the / you could also use in calculated fields in Tableau. So I wanted to talk about that as well. I totally stole the saying, be kind to your future self from Bill. So all of this process is being kind to your future self, 6 months from now when you're involved in lots and lots of things,
Absolutely.
So go ahead.
And me and McDowell say we always hate our future self because if you don't do these steps, you're going to curse your past self. And you'll be like, why did you do this to me? I have no idea what I'm doing. And now I have to spend 2 hours figuring it out. Thank you, me. So don't do that to yourself. Be kind to yourself. But this is Alteryx. So Dawn pointed out a great example of how to comment in Tableau on the formulas, which is fantastic. This is the same sample store data. I can see this information here. You can also comment in here. So if you go up to your worksheet, you can add your captions. So you can show your captions. You can also bring that up and then edit the captions. Let's say I want to make this larger. I don't know why I would go 15 automatically, and bold, and then hit apply, and then you'll see that showing here. It kind of gives you, without even doing anything, because it already knows, Tableau already knows what you're trying to do. It'll show you what that is, what you put on here for this visualization. And this is just a basic visualization of category and subcategory by profit and sales. So you can apply that. The good thing about this is you can also, let's say you have multiple ones where you're showing profit and sales. You can color code this. And I know Dawn was a big fan of color coding. But just make sure you understand what you're color coding and why. Because if you have like purple, green, 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 purple, like put all the purples together and then understand what the purples are for. And then you can rename the sheets as well. Profit and sales. And then the beautiful thing about this caption is, let's say I wanted to create a dashboard and put this on here. I don't know why that went like that. All right. I can put this on here, and then I can just get off of show me and show my captions at the bottom. Now, since I have sum of sales and profit, are any of these really needed for the axis? So you can probably remove the axis because you don't really need them, because we can kind of see down here, what everything is. I can automatically see that I don't need, the actual visualization telling me what it is because I have that in the caption there. So this is a good way to kind of document in Alteryx and Tableau and comment for yourself. So that way you can save yourself some headaches in the future, and also make it visual and understandable for your users when you present the dashboards at the final product.
I wish I could clap. I wish there was a little icon that I could say, yay, please do these tips. They're great documentation tips. Mike, you're up next. Do you have some tips for us?
Absolutely. So, yeah, great tip so far. And I think a lot of these I could file under things I wish I knew when I was earlier in my career when I started using these tools. Because for a lot of us who've been using these tools a long time, you just all of a sudden come up on something that you just never seen before. Like, despite your experience, despite everything you've tried, you just never thought, I never looked under that particular menu. I never saw that was there. I wish I knew this a long time ago. So that's kind of some tips I'm going to focus on for Alteryx. Things that are there, they're right in front of you. You probably got familiar with the tool, but you might just not have seen this particular thing in a workflow before. And hopefully you can see my screen. What we're looking at now is another sample superstore workflow. So very similar to what Bill just put out there. Like Bill, I'm passionate about documentation and making sure your workflow is well documented. Be kind to your future self. I like to use containers as kind of like a header so I can quickly look across and see what my workflow is doing, and then make sure those annotations tell me what those individual tools are doing. It makes it really easy to look across and kind of get a feel for overall what it's doing, and then drill in as you need to without actually having to click on each and every tool. So really appreciate all those tips, Bill. But what I'm going to focus on is tools with select tool functionality. So when we talk about select tool functionality, what we're talking about is if you actually look at a select tool, you'll see you have the ability to check and uncheck all these individual fields. You have the ability to change data type, size, do some renaming. That's really what we're talking about when we talk about select tool functionality. And in this case, I'm going to focus on the select tool itself and then also the join tool to show you some ways that you can utilize these tools a little more quickly than you might be used to when you're going through individual fields and making changes. So hopefully this will be a bit of a time saver for you. So first, let's look at the select tool and just go over some basics. You probably know most of these, but some of you may not. If you go up to the options in the upper left of the select tool, you'll see you have the ability to select or deselect all fields. You have the ability to sort them. More importantly, I know I've messed up my sorting on multiple occasions and been like, how do I get these back the way they were? You have the ability to revert them to the incoming order as well under sort, which is one that I did not find till later in my Alteryx career. So I found that really helpful. You have the ability to move, like if you want to select several columns and move them around, you can do that. So you can use the shift key to move things around. Like if I wanted to move all those to the top, I can move highlighted columns to the top. There you go. They go right up top. Can do the same thing to the bottom. So again, and just some things that can make your life a little bit easier as you're going through with that donkey side. The removal I find works better with the dynamic input tool. So I usually recommend that if you're trying to do anything with prefixes and suffixes and that kind of thing. But you do have the ability to add them in here as well. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on some of the renames and reverting to original type and size. That's another good one. If you accidentally changed a data type or a data size and you wanted everything to go back to the original, again, you can select that revert all option to change it back to what it originally was. And you can also highlight fields to just select to modify some highlighted ones. So now going over to the join tool, you'll see you have a lot of those same options available to you in the join tool. Obviously up top, you're selecting the field you want to join on. And then down below, you'll see you have a lot of that same select tool functionality. One that I find really helpful is here. Let's go ahead and run this. It's a pretty small data set, so you'll see it runs pretty quickly. But what happens is when we leave all the fields in here without making any modifications, without unselecting anything or anything like that, we're going to get some duplicate fields. Obviously, if you're joining one field and you have that same field in a second data set, what that means is you now have two copies of the same field. And because you joined on them, you know they're going to be identical. Like you know those two fields are going to show you the exact same thing. So just to show you an example here, let's look at, let's see, they're going to be the last two over on the right here. I believe it's, yeah, order ID. So we were doing a join on order ID. So you could see that it added that prefix of right because it's a duplicate field. It's not going to give it the same name. So you had that right order ID and then you have your regular order ID. So to quickly and easily prevent that from happening, the join tool actually has an option in it to deselect duplicate fields. And I could tell you most of the time, in at least in my use cases, that's where it comes most in handy on those fields that you're joining on. So you'll see at the very bottom here of the join tool, there's that option to deselect duplicate columns. So now when I click that, you can see it actually unselected two columns. It unselected that order ID I joined in, and there was a second column that's actually a duplicate in this particular data set as well, which is region. So now when I run the workflow, when you look all the way to the right, it's no longer going to have those two duplicate fields all the way over on the right. And I was able to get rid of those without having to go through and scroll through my data set and look for which ones were duplicates and so forth. It actually has that inbuilt functionality right within the join tool, which can save you a lot of time. So definitely recommend checking that one out. Now you can see when I do that and I run the workflow, I actually get a couple new warning messages here. I'm sure we've all seen these when we've run a workflow before, right? And where are they coming from? Bill mentioned how all these tools are numbered. You can see it says in select tool 26, which I could just click on. It's going to take me right up to this select tool up here because I've got 2 fields, those 2 duplicate fields that the join tool removed for me. And it's saying those fields are missing. They used to be in this data set, but they're not there anymore. So it's giving you that warning message to let you know you might have 2 fields missing in your data set. In this case, though, I knew I wanted those taken out. That's exactly what my intention was. And I don't want my log getting cluttered up with a bunch of warning messages that are of no relevance to me and that I totally anticipated. So let's try to clean that up a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on that select tool 26. You'll see it takes me right to the select tool where the warning's coming from. And we've all seen these and been driven nuts by them at various points if you've used Alteryx enough, where you have all these yellow fields at the bottom saying they're missing. Like I said, we know they're missing. We don't want them there. We're ready to forget about them. So let's forget about them. So what you can do is go up into your options menu in the select tool. And there's an option second from the bottom there, forget all missing columns. I'm going to go ahead and click that. And now you can see it went ahead and got rid of those 2 columns that were in yellow there, so that when I run it now, it's going to go ahead and run this workflow. Those missing columns are going to be gone from my select tool, and I'm no longer going to have that warning message popping up, cluttering up my log with warnings that I don't need to research. You always want to make sure your log's clear of stuff that you just don't need to know about. If you've got a field coming out of a union tool that you're expecting that it's not going to be present in both data sets, which a lot of times, like in a left out or join like we have here, will be the case. You can see I actually went into the union tool ahead of time and I changed this warning message from giving me a warning message to just ignoring, because this is a left out or join. I know there's going to be fields present in one data set that aren't in the other. That's another common warning message I see clogging up people's log files that I don't really need. You do have the ability to disable that as well. So lots of good options under the options menu in both the join tool and the select tool. So definitely take a look through there, see what might save you some time. Like I said, it's just one of those tips that teaching both advanced, like Chris mentioned earlier, I teach both brand new beginner users to Alteryx and people who've been using it for years. And I can tell you in both audiences, I find people who see these and were like, I never knew they were there. So hopefully, if that was the case for you as well, that's something that you can start employing. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen.
Notice he had the unknown unchecked on that. So
I did.
Even though it was test data, he didn't need it unchecked. He could have been fine with having it.
That's right. I mean, I'll tell you something. When even when I've been doing this for years, even when I teach, I learn something new from my students every time I teach, because you see a different perspective. You maybe learn a different reason why someone might want to do something. And so that alone is worth the price of admission for me. I mean, I'm all about learning more. I'm a documentation hound. I document the world, because if I win the lottery tomorrow, I'm not going to give a damn about a workflow unless it's going to help me spend whatever it is that I want. But I do value the respect of my colleagues and anybody who's coming in cold, wanting to understand what my macro is doing, what my workflow is doing, or my workflow that has macros are doing. Being able to document using the comment tool, using the containers. I use containers. I mean, I think you probably got a glimpse of one of my workflows that was just ridiculous. What I like to use containers for is just to, if you know you have to climb Mount Everest as far as what your workflow is going to be doing, I would challenge you to put it into individual containers first. So then you're testing bits of code. And then once you're done testing that bit of code, you put that guy into a container and put it in your main workflow. That at that point you say, okay, I know this works because I've tested it. You can check it off. And then as you're building your workflow, you literally will whiteboard it saying, I need this to do this, 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 and this. And you may have a container for each of those guys. So and that's something that's really cool. So that's another reason why I love Alteryx. So, one of the cool things I think I just would love for our viewers to help us out is, what do you want to see? What do you want to dive into? What do you want us to sort of break the walls down? I mean, the four of us and, are all able, willing, and ready to help you with your journey. So let's figure that out.
Awesome. We have one comment for you, Mike, that says, wow, deselect duplicate columns gone. Game changer. So there you go.
Awesome.
I did not know about that one either, and I've been using Alteryx for a while as well. So I echo what Chris says. From viewers, from other perspectives, you always learn something new. I don't think you're actually 100% an expert, because you'll always learn something new about a tool, regularly. Anybody else want to make any comments? We've got 5 or less than 5 minutes left. So I don't know if anybody wanted to put closing thoughts.
No, I mean, I think it's great to understand, what Chris said, like what our users would like to see, because we can gauge, we can do everything beginner, we can do everything advanced. I mean, it just depends on, what you want to see. I know McDowell has common use cases that someone will ask a question. I'll have like a complete walkthrough of how to do that in the most complex terms you can, or the most basic terms that you can. So we can do either one. So I think understanding what the group in this Alteryx Tableau would benefit would be great. And then, just building that community between Alteryx and Tableau. It doesn't have to be a competition. They're both used in conjunction with each other to make data viz powerful, really.
So Mary had asked a good topic of sorting a Tableau table with dates, numbers, and alphas. So the thing with Tableau is that it is not a replacement for Excel, and it does not like big tables. So yeah, you can have a table, you can have a summary, but it doesn't like that column structure. So it's typically better if it has more rows than columns. It'll perform faster. But it just depends on what you're trying to do. Like, what are you trying to create? So, I've had users that are like, I have 50 columns. I don't know why it's slow. Well, because you have 50 columns. So, you just have to keep in mind, what is the use case? Because if you look at an Excel sheet and you're using a lot of filtering, like how long is it taking you to filter down to answer the question you're trying to, answer? Things are just better in visually represented in graphs, and you'll come to the analysis a lot quicker if you are looking at a visualization versus like a set of broad numbers, such as a line graph. You can tell seasonality and trending if you're looking at a line graph versus looking at a broad set of numbers. But we know sometimes there's needs for tables and that kind of thing. But just from a Tableau perspective, that's probably not a good use case. You could use Alteryx and email them the raw data if you need to, because Alteryx does have that email tool. But yes, we can definitely get into sorting in a future use case. Love the sort option in Tableau. I know this session was particularly Alteryx heavy, so I'm thinking maybe future-wise we'll have 2 of us doing Tableau and then 2 of us doing Alteryx. But we both are very passionate about both tools. Chris and I presented at TC24 this year. We both love Tableau and Alteryx. I know Mike and Bill, they love Alteryx and Tableau as well. So great suggestion.
Yeah, and we always say if you're getting your data into Tableau, generally we recommend making it taller, not wider. It really helps Tableau's processing power. And also, anytime somebody comes with the use case for a Tableau dashboard and they ask me how they can download it in Excel, I tell them, no, we're not building a Tableau dashboard. Here's how we can get you an output data set in Alteryx. Because if they're asking how I can download this data in Excel, Tableau is just becoming a delivery platform, and it's so much more powerful than that. We shouldn't be using it for that. If all they need is a sample data set, we can do that in Alteryx and do it way better than we can by putting it into Tableau as an export. So it all depends on your use case, which tool to go with, or if you want to utilize both. So.
But yes, Mary, to agree with you, yes, sometimes you do need to sort. Sorry if we went off on a tangent of like, don't try to recreate Excel in Tableau or something like that. That's just a common, thing we've all run into as developers. I think we've all heard that. Well, this is great, but can you download it in Excel? I think all developers have heard that, and we cringe every time we hear it being said to another developer. So just adding a little bit of humor in this session as well.
Also, can you show me that in a pie chart?
Yeah, can you show me that in a pie chart?
Yeah.
That's the other one that's like, oh.
Yeah, go ahead. When you're using, well, I'm not saying, when you're using doing emailing on Alteryx, there are two ways. You can use the email tool, but you can also create a workflow event. And I find sometimes the workflow event when I'm emailing is much more reliable. So,
awesome.
So think about that. If you want, we can talk about that later.
It'll also prevent you from sending an email to several thousand people, as Dawn found out at one point when she was first utilizing the email tool.
I can send it to 1,000.
That will get you on the penalty box. So.
I don't know what he's talking about. I think you're thinking of another Dawn, perhaps. All right, but thank you everybody for joining us, and appreciate y'all watching. But see you next time. We'll let you know when we're going to have another session. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.